So let's talk about APIs. Earlier on today, we've seen how to create a simple yet effective API, right? So let's see how to integrate this API with the front end. Because at the moment, if I start the server, let's remember how to start the servers. If I go to package.json, we go to start backend, right? Npm Run start backend. That will hopefully, right, I need to stop another server. Sorry about that, that's fine. I have another React application running. So let me kill it. And now hopefully I should be able to start a server. Let's see if it works this time. Here you go, it works now. So once again, at the moment, the only thing we can do is go to localhost 3000 and then go to the endpoint rest characters, I believe. Here you go, and it works, right? But that's not the way we want to integrate our API. We want to be able to invoke or to fetch this array from our React application. All right, so let's see how to do that. This is essentially task number 22, 23, 24, yeah, of Codeflix. So first of all, I need to start the server. I need to find a way to run the front-end server and the backend server. So far, until task number 18, you've been only running a front-end server, which is the React server. If I have a look to the package.json, you see I got start backend, that's the new server, but I got the old one, start. So let me rename it to start frontend. Yeah? So now it's pretty obvious. I have two servers, the frontend, React, and the backend, the APIs. I would like to run them in parallel. But before even trying to do so, let me present you the first problem. So, do you know in which port the backend server runs? 3000, that's correct. Do you know in which port the front-end server runs?
3012.
By default, it's 3000 as well. When you do npm start, if you pay attention to the URL, it says localhost 3000. Can we run two servers on the same port? No, that's not valid. Yeah? One server, one port. Because of that, just to simplify things a bit, because React is using port 3000, let's just change the backend port to 3001. So now, hopefully, we'll be able to run both servers in parallel. Next question is, how do we run the servers in parallel? Of course, we can do npm run start frontend, and it will start the frontend server. But as some of you have already experienced, what happened now with the terminal? Can I type anything here? Well, I can, but will it work? Can I? No, the terminal is busy. So what do we do here? Yes, of course, we can open a new terminal. You know, you can open a new terminal clicking on the plus icon, or you can simply click here on this sexy icon that everybody ignores because of a reason, split terminal. So you got two terminals, one on the left, one on the right. So now on the right-hand side, I can do npm run start backend. You see? So now, look, the front end runs port 3000. The back end is behind my face, but here you go. The back end runs on 3001. So both servers run in parallel. If I go to 3000, I got the React logo. If I go to 3001, I will hopefully get, if I manage to type the right endpoint we created this morning, 3001 characters. Yeah, here you go. Yeah. So both servers are running parallel, but is that what we want to do every time? I mean, in a real application, we always have to start the front end and the back end. So do we really want to manually type npm run start front end and then new tab npm run start back end? Not really, not really. Let me show you a very sexy way to optimize. I want to be able to start both servers in one command. Yeah. So let me kill all the servers and let me show you. on my package.json, I would like to have something like start all. And here, I want to start the front end and the back end. Unfortunately, this is not that simple to run two Node commands at the same time. So let me show you an additional package that I particularly like. So there is a package called Npm, I'll show you, Npm Run All. I've been using it for a couple of years and I find it very interesting because it just works. So Npm Run All gives you the ability of running multiple npm commands at the same time. And interestingly enough, you can run the commands sequentially. So first run this task, like clean, build, whatever, and then once it's done, run the following task. So you can create a chain of tasks, or you can create parallel tasks, and that's exactly what I want to do. So first of all, let's install it. So to install it, we type npm install npm run all. And once we have that, we will be able to run both the front-end and the back-end servers in parallel. Once again, that may take 1 minute or so. Let's see how it goes. All right, so yeah, I need to wait until this finishes, otherwise it's going to be a bit complicated to follow. By the way, you know that if you're installing something, you can open the package.json, but you need to be a bit careful here. Why you need to be a bit careful? Because whenever you type npm install, as you can see here, the file is going to be automatically updated. So we need to be careful by updating a file that is being externally updated at the same time, right? That may create some conflicts. So I will personally recommend you not to touch the package.json file until the installation is finished, which is the case, yeah? Now it's finished, fantastic. So npm run start all. So look at the syntax. Here we can type npm run all -p stands for run the following tasks in parallel. If we have typed -s, that means sequential, right? But I don't want to say, it doesn't really make sense to run the server sequentially. Sequentially means once one task is over, start the next one. The servers never stop. Yeah, they are long-term processes. Because of that, I want to trigger both in parallel. -p, start front-end, and then start backend. So hopefully now, if I type npm run start all, it will trigger, it will kick both servers. You can see now it already started the backend. You can clearly see, and now boom, you see? Now it's starting the server. Still loading, that's the old version. But that looks really promising, to be honest. That's to me the simplest way to deal with front-end and backend at the same time. So now, on the backend, if I refresh, still works, fantastic. And on the front end, still works as well. Cool, fantastic. So the setup is correct. And now, let's integrate this API. You see, REST characters. Sorry, where I am. Sorry, that's not what I wanted to show. In this particular case, right? I want to get this array of characters from the UI. All right, so I'm going to do that using hooks, maybe. We talk about hooks, right? Cool. So let's use hooks. So if I open my front-end file, then let me get rid of the component, of the content of the component. So I want to display the list of characters. Likewise, you have to display the list of movies or TV shows. So, do you remember If no one gives me a right answer, I'll change my mind and I'll go back to stateful component. So does anyone remember how to trigger an action in a stateless component using hooks? How to trigger an action only once? Use effect, and what else? If I do that, the action may run multiple times. Correct. That's correct, Nico. Empty array. So now that code, line number 8, will run only once. Why only once? Because I want to call the backend only once. It doesn't make sense to call the backend every 10 seconds or things like that, right? It's about productivity. If the data is not going to change, don't call the backend again. By the way, before I forget, let's import use effect. So now, how can we set up a state using hooks? So for instance, I want to create a variable characters. So how do we do that? Let const, what else? Square brackets, characters, what else? Correct. Equals what? Use state, right? And now what? What's the default value? I mean, to me, if I have a list of characters, I could think that the default value is an empty array, for instance, right? By default, I have no characters. I'll try to get some. All right, so now let's talk about the complexity of the exercise. In here, how do we get the data from the API, from the backend? You can use something called fetch. Fetch is provided by JavaScript. Yeah? I don't have to import anything. And now I specify the endpoint, the URL. If you remember, it was REST characters. Yeah? Now there is a tricky part. The data offered from the backend won't be readable straight away by JavaScript frontend. So the backend will send some sort of weird blob. It needs to be parsed, it needs to be transformed. How do we do that? Look, type in .then. We'll do a workshop about promises to explain what the .then means. But this is the way to read that is go to the backend, then, that means once the backend has already offered the list of arrays, we got a response. So we have to transform that response, which as I said before, is something unreadable by the web browser, into something readable and manageable. How do we do that? Transforming it to JSON. Yeah, you just need to get used to the syntax. And finally, then, once that step is done, hopefully, here, I got the list of characters. Let's do something. Let's add a console.log. The list of characters is Do you think that will work or not? Why not? That's valid. You can do that in JavaScript. Okay. Yeah. The thing is, if you put a plus, that won't probably work. Why? Because we are adding a string plus an array. That doesn't make sense. I can show you after this workshop my favorite tech talk ever about JavaScript. The guy deals with these oddities. What happens if I add a string plus an object, if I remove an array from a string, things like that, right? So yeah, you can add commas, that's fine. All right, so will this work, yes or no? That won't work. Let me show you why. Right click, first of all, I got nothing. Well, but I mean, I got nothing because I remove everything, right? Let me add at least a hello message. Hello, right? To see if at least I can print something on the screen. Here you go. So yeah, so we got no errors. The app is there. But once again, let's pay attention to the network. This is what you always have to do to see what happened with the traffic between your front end and your back end. So if I refresh the page, look, let's try to find the characters endpoint. Here you go. Is the backend returning the list of characters? That's one of the most awkward messages I've ever seen, right? To me, that tells me absolutely nothing about where the actual problem is. But ignoring the content, ignoring the details of the error, the reality is that's not correct. It's not correct. You can see, I may expect here, if I go to the backend directly using the URL, right? So without conflicts, without any React application, if I go straight to the endpoint, I can see it works, right? So why, if I check the endpoint on the URL, it works. However, if I check the endpoint through the conflicts app, it doesn't work. Can anyone see any difference in this URL compared to that URL? The port is different. In which port the backend is listening? 3001. So the front end is attacking the endpoint on the front end server, which doesn't make any sense because the front end server is just a static React application. The front end server has nothing to do with Node and APIs, right? That's why it doesn't work. So now, some of you may be thinking, all right, let's do this. HTTP localhost 3001. Will this work? Let's have a look. Let's have a look to the error. That doesn't work. There is something important and fundamental here. I cannot do whatever I want from wherever I want. I cannot get data from Google. I cannot get data from YouTube that easily, right? There is something called security. From a web application, I cannot, by default, I cannot refer to an endpoint offered by a different application, by a different server. So if I'm running on port 3000, I can only attack endpoints offered by port 3000, not 3001. You can see at the bottom, more or less, here's the technical explanation of the problem. It's a course policy issue. So course is like a security policy that says that by default, you cannot attack endpoints on a different URL, different server, on a different domain. It is true that you can change your server settings to enable requests from any other server, but by default, that's not allowed. Yeah? And also, there is a separate problem. Even if we customize our backend server to enable requests from the front end, even if we do that, what happens when we deploy our app to Heroku? That won't work because localhost only works when you are working locally. As soon as you deploy the app to the cloud will not be able to understand what localhost means. So that's completely pointless. Never do that. Never refer to localhost in your code. In other words, I want to leave it like that. But it doesn't work, right? Because if we do that, as we proved before, the endpoint, let me see if I can find it again. Here you go. The endpoint returns a weird message. I cannot zoom that. Well, anyway, you got the message there, right? So, what do we need to do? We need to introduce a new technique called proxying. So proxy is like a tunnel. So whenever you send a request to the current server, 3000, first of all, try to satisfy the request. So if the front-end server is already offering the endpoint, stop. But if the front-end doesn't really understand what do you want to do with the endpoint, then you can proxy it, you can delegate it to a different server. That's legal in the web development, right? If you are interested about proxies, there is a lot of literacy on the internet, right? So if you search create React app proxy, you will find a lot of information about how to bypass that security problem, what are the side effects, blah, 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 blah. For now, let's just solve the problem. And to solve the problem, thankfully, we just only need to add one line on the package.json. Every time you change the package.json, we'll probably have to restart the server. So let me kill everything. And now, let me add that line. At some point on that file, it doesn't matter if it's at the beginning or at the end, but on the root level, you need to add a new property, proxy. And the value of the proxy is the target server, which is the backend server, HTTP localhost 3001. So once again, server is running on port 3000, the front-end one. So on the front-end one, if there is a request that the front-end server cannot resolve, it will bypass, it will delegate the request to that server, HTTP localhost 3001, which is our backend server. So let's start both front-end and backend servers again, and let's see if now we can capture the list of characters from the backend. So now it's rendering the page again, and once it finishes, we'll see on the network panel if we get a list of TV shows or not. What do you think? Will it work this time or not? You see, it works now. I'm on the front-end server, that's the React application, and I managed to fetch data from the backend server. Any questions? No? All right, so once we did that, I mean, we've done the complex part already. Why? Because now, can you tell me how to display the list of characters now? What do I need to do here? Say it again, Max? We'll go to map in a minute, but first of all, we need to save in the state. How do we save characters into the state? Correct. Set characters, and then what? What do we put here? Characters, of course, right? The backend offered a list of characters, so let's save it into the front-end state. Of course, you can move it to one line if you want, right? I think it's fairly readable. So now, because our state already incorporates the list of characters, let's display them. So let me add the title, top characters. And now here, we could iterate, right? So look, characters.map, so that will essentially go through each character. And then what? Return something, right? Some HTML, for instance. For instance, what we have the name of the character, right? Name character.name. And that's it. So let's see if our React application displays the list of characters. Does work. Does it make sense? So that's pretty much it, to be honest. Here you see what task 24 is about. You get the list of characters, you save them into the state, and then you just display them, right? Same with the list of movies. Last thing, what happens if we are working on the details page? We don't care about the list of characters. We only care about each individual one. So, you remember we did that this morning? I want to get the character with ID 1. So let's rename our variables a bit. I want to call it character in singular because I don't care about any list. Character and set character, right? Oops, sorry about that. Character. So now, based on that, how do I display the name of the character? Say it again. Character, what? Dot name, correct, because this is what the backend is offering, right? Let's have a look. Oh, I did something wrong. No, it just took a while to refresh. You see, name Donald. Why Donald? Because, look, you see, localhost res characters 1, and it's not returning an array anymore, it's returning an object, character.name. If we change 1 to 2, once it refreshes, Kim. And if we set 3, then you'll see in a second, Boris. What happens if I put 4? Undefined. And then what? Let's have a look. Oh, unexpected end of JSON input. Look, 4, as Sarah suggested, returns nothing. Nothing means nothing, right? Because it returns nothing, it just fails. Yeah? So to me, that's about API. The backend should never return nothing. Because if it returns nothing, my feeling is the backend is broken. It's not responding. So the backend should always return something. In this particular case, let's go back to the backend and let me change the API. So character is retrieved using find. You remember we did that this morning, right? Characters of find. What happens if find is unable to fetch the expected element? What does it return? No, using find in JavaScript. This is beginner training, I think. So if find fails to fetch or to get the data you're looking for, what does it return? Undefined, correct. So here, I can say, return or let me change that. If character return it. Else return, I don't know, an empty object at least, right? Something. And then it's up to the front end to decide what to do in that particular use case scenario, right? And if you want to simplify this if-else logic, you can do something very sexy. You can do that. Character or empty object. The same, right? If I have a character, return it. else, empty object. We'll talk about this sort of Boolean algebra shortly. Yeah? So now, let's go back to our application. Let's refresh. If I refresh, that's good. So now the backend at least is returning something. But now, the front end is a bit weird. Name, empty space, right? Because there is no name property. But I hope you agree with me, we can handle that. We can say character.name, then display that, right? Else, display, I don't know, just a message. Sorry, character not found, sad face. Something like that, right? So if we try again, you see, with character 4, it doesn't work, but if we go back to 1, 2, or 3, you will see in a second, then it works. As part of CodeFlix, you are obviously not going to hard code the ID. So the ID will come from the URL, because you're already setting the ID on the URL. That's number 14 or 12, 13, something like that, right? Cool, and that was pretty much it. Anything else?
Did you use fetch because it was a get request?
That's a really good question. No. Fetch works all time, regardless of whether it's get, post, put, whatever, yeah? Actually, fetch, this is the most simplistic way of using fetch, but there is the fetch API, so JavaScript fetch API, you will see how to deal. Oh, that's a very intense article. I never liked this one. Let me find the easier one. I think this is easy. This is better. Hello. Oh, God. It's taking a while, right? So this is what we are doing. Fetch URL. And then let me try to find a bit more advanced scenario. Nothing. Okay. Thank you for, yes, that's much better. I like that. So, look, using fetch, the first argument is the URL, but on the second argument, you can pass some properties. So for instance, if I remember correctly, the method get is the default one, but I can put post, or put, or delete, yeah? That's correct. Get is the default. But if you want to do anything apart from get, you do need to specify it. What happened now? Will it work? Let's have a look. If I run the app again, 404 not found. Why? Because the backend hasn't specified any endpoint of type post. I think that sounds pretty natural, right? So if we want to post any new character, we may have to add the relevant bits on the backend. But again, this is not for today, it's for tomorrow. Anything else? No? All right, so once you understand that, you're a full stack developer because you can work on the front end and on the back end. Thank you, guys.